Okay, you ran for Senate in 2010. Say, for example, you were president right now. What would you have done, or what should have President Trump have done in this instance? Not give out the money, allow corporations to fail? Like, what is the right call right now?
Well, I mean, first of all, Donald Trump had an opportunity to do the right thing when he first became president, right? He could have continued the same theme that helped him become president, right? When he ran for office, he said we had a phony economy, we had fake numbers, that we had a bubble that was inflated by the Fed, we had a stock market bubble, interest rates were artificially low, we needed to make America great again, we needed to drain the swamp, we needed to reindustrialize the country, we needed to start producing things and shrinking the trade deficit and reducing the size of government and pay off the national debt. So he said a lot of good things to become president. The problem is, once he became president, he abandoned everything he campaigned on, and he became exactly what he was criticizing, a career politician. He became part of the very swamp that he wanted to drain. In fact, he made the swamp deeper. The U.S. government spending increased substantially under Donald Trump, right? And so Trump actually increased taxes because government spending is taxation. The fact that they cut income taxes just means that we're paying for government through an alternative means, and that means was debt and inflation. So Trump squandered the opportunity to do the right thing initially. What I would have done had I been elected president in 2016, I would have leveled with the American public about the nature of the problem, how it was created by the Federal Reserve and by Congress with, you know, all these bubbles and government. And I would have said, here's what we need to do. We need to shrink government dramatically. We need to eliminate the burden that government places on this economy. So we're going to dramatically cut government spending. We're going to eliminate entire agencies and departments. We are going to substantially reduce or eliminate entitlements, including, you know, Social Security, Medicare, things like that, Obamacare. We're going to make government much, much smaller. Also, the Federal Reserve has to let interest rates go up. We can't keep artificially suppressing rates, and so rates have to go higher. And higher interest rates would have brought about a collapse in the stock market, a collapse in the real estate market. There would have been a lot of bankruptcies. A lot of investors would have lost money, but we would have cleaned house. We would have restructured the economy. We would have created a foundation that we could have grown, you know, a real economy on. And with the burden of government dramatically removed from the economy, American companies would be a lot more productive, a lot more competitive, and, you know, maybe by now we would be on the upswing. But we didn't do that. You know, we made the problems bigger. We inflated an even bigger bubble. We continued the same failed policies of Obama, which was a continuation of the failed policies under Bush, which continued the failed policies under Clinton. But, you know, given where we are now, what should Trump do now? Tell the truth now. I mean, hey, we didn't have a great economy before COVID. I was lying about that. We had a big bubble. It wasn't the greatest economy the world has ever seen. It was just the biggest bubble the world has ever seen. And now we just ran into the biggest pin in COVID-19. And because of prior mistakes, we are ill prepared to deal with this crisis. You know, Trump said that, you know, the government has to support the people during this downturn because, you know, COVID-19 was nobody's fault, and therefore nobody should lose their jobs. No businesses should fail. It should be like World War II, right? Everybody has to come together like World War II. Except when we actually had World War II, it was a very different conversation. Roosevelt came to the American public and said, we have an emergency. Therefore, I have to raise your taxes dramatically. The government needs money to fight the Japanese. The government needs money to fight the Nazis. And so we need to raise your taxes. And so taxes went up dramatically during the Second World War. I mean, in 1940, fewer than 3% of Americans paid the income tax. By 1942, because of the victory tax, better than 30% of Americans paid the income tax. And in fact, that's when income taxes started coming out of people's paychecks. in 1942. The government took that money so it could fight the war. Then Roosevelt also said to the American people, we need to borrow from you. It's not enough to triple your taxes. That's not going to cut it. We need even more money. So we need you to buy these war bonds. And so the US government sold war bonds to the American public, and the American public loaned the US government the equivalent of trillions of dollars. So in addition to paying way more taxes, Americans loaned money to the government. Where did they get all this money to loan to the government? Well, A, they had savings, which Americans don't have today. But B, families stopped spending. They didn't go to restaurants. They didn't go out to the theater. They didn't travel and take vacations. Instead, they loaned that money to the U.S. government by buying war bonds. No businesses got bailed out, right? How many businesses were disrupted by World War II? We had 16 million American men, young men, that we shipped over to Asia and Europe. Those 16 million customers were no longer patronizing businesses. What happened to those businesses? Did anybody get a check from the government? No, nobody got a check from the government. Everybody was sending checks to the government. The people supported the government during World War II. Now, Donald Trump and Congress is acting as if the government can support the people as we fight a war on COVID-19. How is that possible? I mean, if this was true, why didn't we do the same thing back in 1941? Why didn't Roosevelt say, hey, nobody has to worry about losing their jobs. Nobody has to worry about paying their rent. I mean, this war is nobody's fault. I mean, it's not your fault that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So don't worry. No one's going to have to pay higher taxes to fight this war. Nobody's going to have to buy any war bonds. We're just going to print money, and that's how we're going to pay for the war. We'd have lost the war in a heartbeat. The Japanese and the Germans would have killed us. Because in order to have bombers, in order to have tanks and ammunition, you can't print that stuff. It has to be produced. You need real.
And we were still on the gold standard back then.
And the same is true to fight the war on COVID-19. We can't fight it with a printing press.